Alright, here we are, and we're going to talk about the EVAP canister. And I apologize, the lighting's probably poor in this video because we've got the sun shining through. Most of you know that the EVAP canister goes between these two frame rails here, and it is susceptible to damage from rocks and whatnot. Plus, this is where we want to run our muffler. So essentially, you got a couple of choices. You can go out and pay $50, $100, $200 for an EVAP relocation kit. I'll show you how to do it on a budget. Basically, you're going to take the EVAP canister with its original factory bracket. We do a one hole here in the coil tower, and then we run one strap. This happens to be 3/16, so it's really strong, over to the other hole. So this allows it to mount solely on the frame. Do not run a bolt up through and into the body. There's no reason to damage the body. If you run it up into the floorboard, you never know what you're going to run into. Plus, now you've got this canister run between the body and the frame, so it's always going to be under some kind of flex. Now, I get a lot of tech questions on the EVAP system, and I need to explain a little how these systems work. The Chrysler system is essentially crap. The Chrysler system uses a EVAP system integrity monitor. That's this white box here. And while in the 80s and 90s that worked pretty good, we really want something better. So what GM does is they have a closed loop feedback system which requires a fuel tank pressure sensor, so the computer can monitor the pressure in the fuel system, then react accordingly. So we're adding this fuel tank pressure sensor. We supply this in the kit with the hose already on here. This is the vent line coming from the tank up to the filler neck. Cut a couple of inches out, put our hose on, run some, even though you probably don't have to because this is mainly under vacuum, run a couple of tie wraps around here tight, or a couple of small fuel injection clamps. You can see we have one up here. And that's all you got to do for the GM system to get the fuel tank pressure signal. Now, the GM system does two things when it monitors fuel tank pressure. One is it purges, so it can purge the hydrocarbon vapors out of this EVAP canister, and that uses the purge valve, which is up on the engine. So we're going to plumb that later, and that's already on the engine. And the other function is venting. So we have a vent solenoid we're adding, and that's right here. Now, you can add this vent solenoid pretty much anywhere in this vent line. This line here goes to the fuel tank, obviously. That's where it's pulling the vapors from. Then this line is to vent, if necessary. So we see our vent solenoid here, and yes, we do supply this, and we'll have a connector on here for you. So you can install this coming right off the ESIM. ESIM stands for EVAP System Integrity Monitor, and essentially all it is a valve, a couple of spring-loaded valves inside there, and I'm going to pull it off here in a second and show it to you. And it basically seals the fuel system based on spring-loaded weights, and that's not optimal for an off-road vehicle that's bouncing around a lot. The switch on there is the way that the Jeep computer knows when the system reaches its pressure limits, whether it's vacuum or pressure. So it's kind of an on-off system where the GM uses a 3-wire closed loop system and is much more accurate. So we're upgrading this system to the newer EVAP setup, and you'll never smell fuel again on the trail, especially when you're in 4-wheel drive. I don't know if some of you guys have experienced that with the 3.8s, but you won't with this setup. So let me pull this ESIM off, and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm going to kind of wing this with one hand, but hopefully you guys can see there is a little tab here. And before I release that, let me mention something. You need to mount this canister the way it was originally. Don't mount it vertically, don't mount it upside down, because the way this system is designed, it has to be run in the original position. So we're going to pull this little tab up here, which I've already released. We're going to rotate it, and it's going to come out. Now, there is an O-ring, which is not on here. Usually they're green. This one happens to have a black one. but it's a flat O-ring. I don't know if you can see it in there. Make sure that O-ring is there. If this O-ring is not there, you're going to end up with a PO 455 or a 4 something code that says you have an EVAP leak. This O-ring is supposed to stay on the valve, but it never does. So guys pull it off, the O-ring falls off, they put it back on not knowing it's supposed to be there, and then you start getting codes. So here's your little locking tabs you can now see. Now the important thing is, I mentioned this was a spring-loaded system. Well, if you look in here, there's a cylinder-shaped valve. You will notice we placed that valve in the center position and pinned it. The reason we did that is the GM system can work more efficiently, not having the Chrysler system trying to seal the system. So we are effectively sealing the system now with this EVAP vent solenoid. So we no longer need this spring-loaded valve that bounces around off-road. So let's just pin that in the middle, and then you can reinstall your EVAP vent solenoid. Make sure that your hoses are away from your exhaust. You're going to see the exhaust is going to come through here. So while the body's off, try to keep these hoses up as high as possible. You'll see that these come right out where they originally were. This is your vent for the filler neck. This is your fuel filler tube here, and then of course this is the vent that goes up to the muffler. Excuse me. Now I will say this vehicle also does not have the anti-back splash, or when you're putting fuel in these things they tend to spit back, and Chrysler has changed tanks and made all sorts of updates, but really the way to fix that problem is to go to a new intermediate tube. This is the intermediate tube, and what they do is they put a one-way valve in here so the fuel can go in but it won't come back. It's a larger section right in here with a flap, so that when you put the fuel in, the flap opens, and if fuel tries to spit back, the flap shuts. And it's very effective. It costs $35 to $40 if you can get one at your dealer. I know that they're back ordered, but if you have your Jeep apart, go ahead and get one of those and you'll never have fuel spit back again. Then these will connect right back up the way they were prior to you pulling the body off. There's our fuel tank pressure sensor. There's our vent solenoid. We've pinned our ESIM. And make sure when you reinstall this that the O-ring is on there. And we're just about ready to drop the body, at least as far as the rear section goes.